Carl Jung discovered that spiritual awakening doesn't energize you, it empties you. After studying hundreds of patients who experienced spiritual breakthroughs, Jung found that 70% lost all motivation within months, not because they failed, but because they succeeded too well at seeing through life's illusions. Jung called this the awakening paradox, the moment when enlightenment becomes emptiness, when clarity becomes confusion, when spiritual success becomes psychological crisis. You thought awakening would set you on fire with purpose. Instead, it extinguished every flame that used to drive you. Right now, you might be lying in bed wondering why nothing matters anymore. Why do the goals that once excited you now feel hollow? But Jung discovered something that changes everything. This emptiness isn't a spiritual failure, it's a psychological necessity. And there's a specific process for transforming this void into authentic motivation. You've been told that awakening leads to bliss, that consciousness brings clarity. But Jung discovered the opposite is true. The more you awaken, the more you realize that every goal you've been chasing was an illusion rooted in ego, fear, or social conditioning. Jung found that spiritual awakening forces you into what he called the Nigredo, the blackening phase, where your old self dies, but your new self hasn't been born yet. You're stuck in psychological limbo, too conscious to go back to sleep, but not yet awake enough to know what comes next. Most people think they're experiencing spiritual depression, but Jung warned that trying to return to old motivations after awakening is like trying to put a butterfly back in its cocoon. It's a betrayal of your own evolution. Let me tell you about the patient who made Jung realize that spiritual awakening could be more psychologically dangerous than sleeping through life. Her name was Sarah, and she came to Jung after experiencing what she described as complete ego death during meditation. For weeks afterward, Sarah felt euphoric. She had touched the divine. But then something terrifying happened. Sarah couldn't get out of bed. She stopped eating. She quit her job, not out of depression, but out of profound indifference. "I've seen the truth," she told Jung. "Nothing matters. Goals are illusions. I can't pretend anymore that any of it has meaning." Jung recognized that Sarah wasn't experiencing spiritual failure. She was experiencing the Nigredo, the necessary death phase that precedes rebirth. Jung discovered that all human motivation falls into two categories: persona-driven and self-driven. Persona-driven motivation comes from your false self, the mask you wear to get approval and avoid rejection. This includes career ambitions, relationship goals, and status pursuits. Self-driven motivation comes from your authentic core, beyond social conditioning. This motivation emerges from internal alignment rather than external validation. Here's the paradox. Spiritual awakening destroys persona-driven motivation before self-driven motivation emerges. You're left in a gap where the old fuel has been depleted, but the new fuel hasn't appeared yet. But Jung discovered something remarkable about patients who learned to wait consciously in the void. They began to notice subtle impulses that felt completely different, not driven by fear or pressure, but emerging from what Jung called soul calling. Jung realized that self-driven motivation doesn't feel like traditional motivation at all. It doesn't push or demand. It calls, whispers, and invites. It feels less like "I have to" and more like "I get to." Jung identified 3 stages in this transformation. Stage 1. Conscious dissolution. Instead of fighting the emptiness, you consciously cooperate with it. Jung developed sacred grieving, actively mourning the death of your old motivations. You acknowledge what they gave you while consciously releasing them. Stage 2. Active imagination. You dialogue with your emerging authentic self. You sit quietly and ask, "What wants to be born through me?" Then you wait for images, words, or feelings to arise spontaneously, receiving what emerges without judgment. Stage 3. Symbolic living. You follow fascination instead of obligation, curiosity instead of strategy. Jung found that people living symbolically often accomplished more because they were working with their authentic nature. Jung's most profound discovery was that soul motivation feels completely different from ego motivation. Ego motivation feels urgent, driven, and anxious. It's fueled by fear and carries a sense of, I have to do this, or something bad will happen. Soul motivation feels calm, magnetic, and inevitable. It's fueled by love and carries a sense of, I get to do this because it's what I am. Jung worked with a patient named Michael who illustrated this perfectly. Before awakening, Michael was motivated by anxiety about financial security. After awakening, that motivation died completely. But slowly, Michael began noticing impulses to work with his hands, creating furniture. It doesn't feel like motivation, Michael told Jung. It feels like remembering something I always knew but had forgotten. Jung discovered that soul motivation operates differently. It's seasonal, coming in waves rather than being constantly available. It's collaborative, working with life circumstances rather than controlling them. It's mysterious, you often don't understand why you're called until after you follow. It's sustainable, generating energy rather than depleting it. The key insight: authentic motivation doesn't feel like motivation at all. It feels like following your natural inclinations, like water flowing downhill. Here's Jung's ultimate insight. The emptiness you're experiencing isn't the absence of purpose. It's the presence of purpose so authentic that your ego can't recognize it. Your old motivations had to die because they were keeping you from discovering what Jung called the life that wants to live through you. The void isn't empty, it's pregnant with possibilities. The awakening didn't kill your motivation. It killed your limitations. Practice what Jung called conscious waiting. Instead of trying to force new goals, spend time each day asking, what wants to emerge through me? Then, listen without judgment. Jung discovered that authentic purpose can't be figured out. It can only be lived into. Trust that your soul knows what it's doing, even when your mind doesn't understand. You're not broken for losing motivation after awakening. You're being prepared for motivation so authentic it will transform not just your life, but everyone your life touches. The spiritual emptiness you're experiencing isn't a crisis, it's spiritual pregnancy. Something beautiful is being born. Write in the comments, I trust the process, if this resonates. Let's build a community of people who understand that sometimes we need to lose ourselves completely before we can find ourselves authentically.